Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today we have a question from Steven, who says, I've got a question that's bugged me for a long time. Some of the gyms I used to train at in the past have taught a technique, then we perform it. Then they ask us to switch stance and do it again. I don't get the benefit in that. I'm an orthodox fighter, so I'm going to predominantly fight orthodox. I don't see a need to be an ambidextrous fighter. It wouldn't bother me doing that in my spare time to maybe work on switching things up, but some classes would pay equal time to both stances. I'm not talking about switch kicks or training either leg to build up power and flexibility. This was asking an orthodox fighter to spend half his training time southpaw and a southpaw fighter to spend half his time training orthodox. So my question to you is there any major benefit to training like this? Okay, Stephen, I would say that is an inefficient way of training. It is. Once in a while, it is good to switch things up. And again, like you said, in your own time. That's the best time to do that. I imagine what was probably happening was your coaches had right-handed and left-handed people in the class, and they were trying to accommodate both by saying, all right, we'll do it from this stance and then that stance. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is that the techniques a southpaw fighter will employ are not the same. They are not the mirror image of the techniques an orthodox fighter will use. The strategies are completely different. They are radically different. And just flip-flopping a mirror image of it is doing a great disservice to both. Okay? Because that's essentially teaching a lie. It's teaching that southpaw is just the reverse of orthodox. It's not. So, as a once-in-a-while exercise, sure, that's fine, you know. I would recommend, something I recommend to a lot of my fighters, actually, is brush your teeth with your left hand if you're a right-handed person, and if you're a left-handed person, brush your teeth with your right hand. Why? Because it will give you some experience doing something from the other side, but it's not going to detract from your training time. It's not going to add any extra time to your day, or take away time from your day, right? You brush your teeth anyway, right? At least you should, I hope. So try it out with your left hand. Exercise that other side of your brain. And then you will start developing aptitudes, opening up new neural links and pathways that were not there before in some surprising ways, just by doing something as simple as spending a couple minutes using your opposite hand for a mundane task. So no, you do not need to spend half of your time changing stances, right? In a Taekwondo class, this may be the exception to the norm. In a Taekwondo class, this is different. Because Taekwondo and combat sports like that are very, very reliant on switching stances. Switching stances constantly is an integral part of the game of Taekwondo. So if it's a Taekwondo class, yeah, absolutely train both stances constantly. Train techniques from both sides constantly. That is a 50-50 situation. Almost every other combat sport, no. Let's talk about jiu-jitsu for a moment. Most people don't think about orthodox or southpaw when it comes to jiu-jitsu because you're on the ground and you're not in a stance with one foot in front of the other. But generally speaking, we do a technique from one side or the other. So, let's take a technique like a hip bump sweep. One of the first techniques a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu white belt learns. They learn how to sit up and climb over that shoulder and twist their body and knock the other guy onto his back and get on top. It's a good move. It's one of those moves that everybody needs to learn and master in the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And not surprisingly, most right-handed people are better at doing it on their right side than on their left. So does that mean, should we practice that hip bump on just the right side, or should we practice it on the left side. Jiu-jitsu and grappling, it's a little different, because there I would say, yes, train it on both sides. But at the same time, master it on one, especially when it comes to attacks. Defensive moves in grappling, drill them to death on both sides. Offensive moves, you get to pick and choose a little bit more, sometimes a lot more. So drill them on both sides, understand them on both sides, but master them on one. The attacks, the offensive moves, master on one. Now, as far as striking goes, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Sanda, that sort of thing, it's good to have some switch steps type of moves in your arsenal, like a switch kick, for example, just like you said. But no, don't be wasting half of your time switching stances, doing the mirror reverse of whatever you practiced, because that simply will not be applicable against real live humans. It won't, because real live people don't move that way. If your coaches fail to understand that, they have failed to understand fighting. Let's take a simple example. Okay, the right cross counter. All right, I'm an orthodox fighter. My opponent is an orthodox fighter. He's throwing out a jab with his left hand. I can read that jab now. Okay? So I understand the way his body's moving. I see his setup. I see the way he kind of tilts forward as he throws that jab. So I see it coming, and I counter with my right hand. I slip over to my left. I throw my right cross out there. Boom, I hit him in the face. That's a good move. A lot of people have been knocked out with the right cross. Fantastic move. You should all learn it, master it. Okay. Now, let's flip that over to a mirror image and turn it into a left cross. Okay, so I'm standing in a southpaw stance. And the guy is standing across me, orthodox stance. And he's throwing out his jab. I'm starting to be able to read that jab. Okay. And I'm thinking, I'm going to time that jab, slip over to my right, and then throw a left cross. I'm not in the same position as that orthodox fighter is. That's not going to work out the same way. It's just not. It's not how physics and body alignment works. I've got to do something else. A left-handed fighter is going to move. How? When the other guy is pumping out his jab? Is he going to weave over to the right? Probably not, because that other guy may be countering, following up that jab with a straight right of his own. Okay? So the response is going to be different. The strategy is going to be different. Can't emphasize that enough. Anyway, so are you right in your thinking that you should master one stance? Yes, you should. You absolutely should. I came from a Taekwondo background, where switching stance is an integral part of the sport, because you're constantly doing it, because it's all kicks. It's all kicks, and when you're in a sport where kicking the body and kicking the head is the sport, essentially. I mean, you can punch the body, but barely anybody does that or pays attention to it. And it's difficult to score doing that, and it puts you at great risk of getting kicked in the head attempting it. So essentially it's the sport of kicking the body, kicking the head. Yeah, switching stance is a huge part of that. And so it was difficult for me to understand, why should you just get married to one stance? Why can't I bounce around all the time? Until I got in a kickboxing match and got punched in the face a whole bunch of times trying that. And I was like, whoa, okay, that makes a lot of sense now, because the context is different. Because in that sport you couldn't punch the face, in this one you can. And therefore my strategy must adapt. And so I really have to understand how the hands work in the context of the footwork of boxing and kickboxing, because that changes everything, right? Little details like one foot in front of the other versus the other foot in front of the other change everything. Pay attention to those, man. Pay attention to those. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.